Hi, welcome to Legal Talk, a show where we aim to bring you important legal information that could affect your business and family. I'm your host, Stacy Clark. Today's show is going to be a big one. Our topic is cybersecurity and what area businesses need to do to protect themselves from this very real and huge threat. My guest experts today are partners from one of Montgomery County's largest and most respected law firms, Whistler Pearlstein. Whistler Pearlstein's data privacy and cybersecurity practice helps businesses today deal with the potentially huge data privacy obligations and penalties they face. Chris Ezold and Joe Clement head up the firm's cybersecurity practice and on a weekly basis are working with businesses to put effective policies in place, address breaches, and prepare for the emerging future of data privacy. So we're really lucky to have them here with us today, and boy, do we have a lot to cover. So let's jump right in. Joe, welcome. Why should area businesses be concerned about data privacy?
Well, Stacy, if you're like me and listen to sports talk radio in the morning, you've probably heard the ad saying that 60% of businesses fail right after a successful cyber attack. So that's one reason right there why they should. Another reason is we're in a very target-rich environment, particularly for social engineering attacks. And I mean target-rich by this. We have many affluent businesses in this community, very successful businesses, wide-ranging from mom-and-pop flower shops all the way to multinational pharmaceutical companies that are headquartered in Delaware County or Montgomery County. Those businesses also are intertwined with our areas of higher education, the Villanovas of the world, our Sinuses, Abington, Penn State. So when those all come together, those businesses, those colleges and universities all come together, they're very ripe for social engineering attacks. And what I mean by social engineering are psychological manipulations of people to do something, to let down their guard, provide a piece of information, confidential or privileged information that they wouldn't otherwise provide. So those are some reasons why these local businesses need to be concerned.
Yeah. One of the major issues is that we're living in what I'm calling the end of the age of privacy. There was the Stone Age, there's the Industrial Age, and I think this little slice of time might be called the age of privacy in the future. You know, from the 90s on when there was data, but you knew you could protect it. That's over. Data is not protectable anymore. Everybody is going to have a breach. The question is not if, but when.
Wow.
And so if you're a business in any area, and you collect data from customers, you get financial data, credit card data, you have data on your competitors, your employees, and you keep that data, there's going to be a breach. The question really isn't, will there be a breach, but when and how prepared you were for it.
Boy, that's really scary. So what kinds of laws apply to businesses in Pennsylvania?
All of them. But from a cybersecurity perspective and an information security perspective, there isn't one national legal framework or international legal framework that they need to comply with. So basically all the state laws where they conduct business or have clients or customers, they need to comply with in addition to Pennsylvania law. If they're international, they have to comply with the international laws as well, the laws of Japan, the European Union. There's just no set standard today. And that's really scary for a lot of businesses. One recent development in Pennsylvania, by way of example, is employers are now liable for protecting their employees' data. And if there's a breach, they're now liable for whatever damages may occur, purely economic or otherwise. We just saw something fairly recently where an employer had some of their employees' data stolen, and that data was then used to create fake tax returns. And as a result, the employer was liable for that.
Wow. So there's employer liability now.
Absolutely.
And that can run into millions of dollars of liability?
Yes, yes.
Wow. So how can a business comply with these laws, Chris?
So I'm not going to say it's impossible to comply, but if you have a website and you have customers in Massachusetts and California, and you have some who've come here from Europe and then have flown back and have accessed something through the website, bought something through the website, et cetera, you have to be responsible under the laws of those states to comply with their laws. If you're a small to mid-sized business, complying with this patchwork, it's incredibly difficult. So what you really want to do is ensure you do two things. First, get cyber liability insurance. That's absolutely critical. It'll help, A, give you some resources to deal with cyber liability issues and protection, and B, give you some resources to pay if there are damages and potentially even give you attorney's fees to defend yourself. But you have to get the right policy. So knowing the right insurance broker is actually pretty important.
Yeah.
So beyond insurance, you have to take reasonable care to protect the data that's in your possession. This is not a standard that particular states use. It's something that I'm giving as a general rule of thumb for business. Make sure you take reasonable care to protect your data and your customers and clients and employees' data. And there's a lot of things that you can do that will help you comply with all of these state laws. First is encryption. Make sure your data is encrypted at rest. That is where it's stored, and in transit, from where it's stored to your client, to you, wherever it goes. Push everything out into the cloud. Don't have a server on site. Cloud-hosted service is inexpensive these days. It's run by professionals. Unless you're an IT security organization, you don't professionally run your own system. Don't try it. It's not a hat you should wear. Push everything out into the cloud. Third, make sure you have backups. Hourly backups are best, daily if you have to, so that if there is a data loss, and we have a lot of ransomware attacks occurring these days where your data is encrypted so that you can't get into it, and that's a big problem in healthcare right now. If you have it backed up, you can replace it. And if you replace it and there's no loss of data, no harm to the data, no one's able to get access to it because you've encrypted it in the first place, you don't have a breach. And you won't have a problem with the various laws. Now, this is obviously very fact specific. I'm not saying any encryption or backup process will work, but you have to make sure you do it correctly.
Are there any other steps that would constitute reasonable care in your mind?
Absolutely. Social engineering, as Joe mentioned, is the biggest threat. So train your employees. More importantly, keep a record of training your employees so you can prove you did what you were supposed to do.
Yeah.
Make sure that you have an annual risk analysis. That is, where is my data? How is it used? How is it stored? How is it transmitted? Who has access and who shouldn't? What passwords do we have? What systems do we use? And then when you have that report, you then create a work plan, because that report will identify gaps. And if you have a work plan that says, here's the schedule of things that I'm going to do to fill my gaps, then you know that you're taking reasonable care to get things done. It's not possible to fill all the gaps right away. It can be very expensive and time consuming. You're much better off scheduling out what you need to do, knowing what's on fire now, and knowing what you can reasonably delay using reasonable care.
That's so interesting. And I'm sure that you have a checklist that you offer businesses to go through what they should be doing.
That's correct. There are many more factors. And we do provide checklists for our clients and then help them manage their way through it.
Yeah, because it seems like there's so many specific things that businesses should be doing in Pennsylvania right now to protect themselves. So, Joe, are there certain industries that are more affected than others by this kind of thing?
You know, all industries affected by cybersecurity and by data breach. What we're seeing is more publicized events that are happening in the healthcare field, the finance and banking industry. Are probably the two most publicized industries. Healthcare, just because there's so much data that's available out there, personal information data, where your healthcare provider is sharing that data with an insurance provider, and there's not just that threat of a breach and a real breach, but a sometimes just a mismanagement of information and it gets out there accidentally. In the banking field, what we're seeing a lot of is still wire fraud or attempted wire fraud. All it takes is a routing number to go unencrypted in an email or even by a fax to someone else, a third party, and there isn't going to be an attempt, I would imagine, at a wire fraud.
Wow. And that leaves the bank open to so much exposure?
It does. And they're the two most regulated industries, and they do have standards of regulation across the healthcare fields and across the banking and finance industries, but we're still seeing those attacks happen.
And we were loosely talking about this before we started shooting today about criminal penalties. Is that something that we may see?
There is that possibility, yes, in fact.
So that's hugely serious for Pennsylvania businesses to take this very, very seriously. So what are some common threats that you're seeing in the cybersecurity zone?
Well, social engineering is by far the biggest threat, and social engineering is just a modern-day digital con.
A digital con. Okay, I like that
example
expression.
what it is. It's
Yeah.
really a digital con. It's a psychological manipulation of a person so that they give up some data that they wouldn't otherwise do, or do something to lessen a security measure or lower a security measure. And we have this concept, at least many people do, of it being something like a scene out of the Matrix, where there's 100 computer screens sitting around and ones and zeros falling down the wall. It's not that. Some of the most successful cons or cyber attacks start with a simple phone call. Somebody impersonating another person. There's a pretty famous one out on YouTube right now from Kevin Roos, who went to a great length to show how easy it is to be able to have your identity stolen, where it's simply a young woman impersonating his wife, a newlywed, with a crying baby in the background, calling a provider, and within maybe 30 seconds she has his personal information and account. So it's that simple. It starts with one little piece of information. They build upon that. The hackers are very good about building on information, storing that information, that data, and then using it to expose financial risk. So there's really two, I think, social engineering techniques that we could get into today in a little more detail, and that's baiting and spear phishing.
Yeah, tell us about them. First, what is baiting?
Baiting's really interesting, and it's something that the Pentagon is very familiar with, because back in 2008, this is what caused that massive problem that they had with thousands of computers being infected. And it was as simple as somebody picking up a USB flash drive in the Middle East, plugging it into a DoD computer, and then infecting the entire system. So baiting is just hackers placing small flash drives, USB thumb drives, CDs in public and semi-public areas, a parking lot, a bathroom, a coffee shop, a Starbucks, something like that. And individuals will go and pick that up. The curiosity kind of kills the cat. People will go pick it up, and then they have a tendency to plug it in to their computer and access whatever is on that little thumb drive or USB drive.
Yeah.
I was right. And a lot of times they have something on there that says, they name those thumb drives, confidential information or proprietary information or financial data. So it's something of great interest to anybody. More recently, in 2016, the University of Illinois conducted a study through some of its professors where they left about 297 flash drives around the campus.
Around the campus?
Yeah, just to see what would happen. And 98% of them were picked up.
Oh, and people then plugged them in?
They did. They actually had a program where if that flash drive was plugged into a computer and the file actually accessed, it would send a little ping back to the professors. And what we found is 45% of the time, people didn't just plug it in, but tried to access those files. Once that happens, the entire system that you're on is now vulnerable, and any system that that computer goes to is then vulnerable.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so that's baiting. Okay, so what are some other ways of social engineering to get into our data?
Sure, spear phishing is probably one of my favorites. And this is one where, if you think about phishing, and that's phishing with PH. It's kind of like that junk mail that you get in your email box.
Okay.
Most of us can identify what that is, and very rarely does it get opened, maybe 3% of the time. Spear phishing is a highly targeted attempt at phishing, where the email may only go to 3 or 4 people, a CEO, a CFO, and a COO of a company, for example. And the email will look like it's coming from one of their colleagues, maybe the president of the company, and indicating something along the lines of, well, hey, I'm not going to be in today. Could you take this meeting for me? Could you take this appointment for me? And then it'll have a link or an attachment to click on. What we found statistically is that those spear phishing emails are opened 70% of the time.
70%?
Yeah,
Wow.
and about half of the time, once those emails are opened, somebody clicks on the link. Once that happens again, the system's exposed.
The whole system's exposed just by clicking on the link.
That's right. And the really, really, really important thing to remember here is that might remain latent on your system for years. Just sending data back to the hacker or doing nothing at all until it's woken up by the hacker, and then your system is really in trouble.
Wow. Is that the Trojan horse approach?
It's sometimes referred to that as a Trojan horse approach. It's a little different than the virus, but yes, that's exactly what it is.
Okay. Well, let's talk about some other areas of social engineering.
Sure.
Vishing, phishing,
Sure.
smishing, pretexting. Tell us about some other ways that folks are trying to get our data.
So smishing is a more modern approach, and it's also part of the SIM card hack. It can cause real problems in two-factor authentication. And what you do is you get, somebody will send you a text message, an SMS text message. The hacker will send that off to you. I got one actually not long ago impersonating my child's Verizon locator. So,
really?
Yeah. So you get this thing, and
They
it looks
sent
like
it to the wrong person, I think.
this time. But it looks very much like it should be coming from Verizon. But usually Verizon has that like 009 number or something it says
Yeah,
from. This
yeah.
had a different number. It had like a legitimate area code looking number, 215, whatever. Looked at it, was about to click on it, said, nah, that's not right. But that's what will be sent to somebody. And once they click on that, it says you're off. In this case, it said locator's not working properly. Click here or follow this link. Once you click on that, your phone is then compromised. And once that SIM card is compromised, two-factor authentication can be compromised as well.
Oh, wow. So take us through some of the other threats. This is really scary.
Yeah, it's interesting. So vishing is basically using a voice system. Excuse me. And in vishing, you'll get a call. Doesn't necessarily have to be from a live person. It could be from a very
This is vishing.
authentic
Okay.
sounding recording, asking for a bank, for example.
Yeah.
Asking for, again, routing information or
Yeah.
account information. And you tend to give that information up. They'll ask for it. It's a recording. They say send it to this or call this person, send it to this email address. And what we found is employees will often say, oh, this sounds authentic, this sounds real, let me call and give the information out. Well, once that information is given, it's out there. And it doesn't take many pieces of information like that to be able to piece together something that can be of great financial loss to a company. Once the bank account's out there, every company has a website that has their CFO or CEO named on it.
Yeah, for sure.
Bank account, authorized representative, and it doesn't take much to get a signature from somewhere.
So that really, again, points to the fact that your employees could be a huge liability if they're not trained on what not to open.
Absolutely. And if there is one takeaway from this program, it's exactly that, from me anyway, that employees are the greatest resource any company has. But
Sure.
as far as cybersecurity and information security are concerned, they're by far the greatest threat. They need to be trained properly.
Are there other threats you want to make us aware of today?
There's a number of them, but I think that we don't have time to go through all of them. Pretexting, I'll just mention very quickly.
Yeah, please do.
And that's where, again, there's a pretext. It is a con. Where somebody is posing as somebody else. We kind of went through the one on the phone call with the newlywed.
Mm-hmm.
There's a number of those that happen where it's just a pretext. Somebody calls and says, I am your Verizon provider. I am your trash hauler, whatever it may be. They ask for your account information. Hey, on file, it's this. And they'll tell you a fake or phony account number. You say, no, that's not my account. My account number is this. All of a sudden, you've given them your account information.
So in general, when a bank is calling you to tell you that there's been fraud on your account, or you've gotten some other alert that comes by phone, is there a way to know whether that's credible or not? Are there certain standards that, for example, financial institutions are held to in terms of, we'll never send you something via email, we'll always do it by phone?
Well, they're required to send everything encrypted. All wire instructions and things of that nature should be sent encrypted. But a little common sense goes a long way as well with your employees. Always check the number that you're calling. Know the number that you're calling. Almost all businesses have a personal relationship with their bank at some level. So they should make sure if any employee gets a call from a bank and says to call another number, make sure that they first check that number and understand that it's a legitimate number.
And if you get a warning from your credit card company that says, oh, there's been fraud, you don't have to talk to them right then. You can go on their website or on the back of your card and get the number. Call back. so that you're in control. You know you're calling the right number, and then say, I've just been contacted about credit card fraud on my card. Is this accurate? Is there a problem? And then they'll give you that information. So you don't have to engage if you're concerned there's a problem with the person on the call. You can always get the information you need, not from that person, because they'll give you false information, but from the web or from your own records, and then call the institution.
That's really helpful advice.
Yeah.
I really appreciate knowing that personally. So, are there warning signs of a successful social engineering scheme, Chris?
So the first two warning signs are you haven't trained your people and you haven't put a program in place. If you haven't done those two things, just assume you've been breached.
Oh, wow.
Just assume it's happened, because it's clever and innocuous, and what's being hacked is not your computer, it's your people. So exactly like Joe was saying, if you haven't trained them, it's probably happened. So that's first. Other warning signs are you get calls out of the blue from numbers you don't recognize, emails out of the blue that seem weird. If your gut is telling you, I don't know about this, trust your gut. The worst thing that happens is you'd spend a little time verifying what's going on. No loss to you.
Sure.
If you don't trust your gut and you give the information out, at one of the times you don't trust your gut is when you're going to have a breach. If someone calls and says, I want you to pay me in iTunes gift cards, in Amazon gift cards, and there's a lot of these scams out there, just know the IRS doesn't take payment in back taxes in gift card format. And there's been a big IRS gift card scam out there.
Really?
Absolutely. Calls out of the blue are always a problem. There is a scam in Pennsylvania right now where someone will call a physician saying, I'm from the Board of Medicine, you have a licensure problem, you have to pay a back fee of something. Well, most doctors are going to say, fine, whatever, and just pay it. It's not going to occur to them that someone would have taken the time to look up their information, get it from the website, call and pretend to be the wrong person, and get them to pay. They're just going to protect their license and move on with their day caring for their patients. So out of the blue calls are a problem. Gift cards are a problem. If someone says, hey, sends you an email, hey, I am in such and such a place, I need emergency bail money, your nephew is in jail, etc. You check on these things. Those are popular scams as well. And obviously, the message from the hacker themselves. In a ransomware attack, where they encrypt your data against you so that you can't get into it, they will offer to give you the key to get back in exchange generally for Bitcoin. That's how they generally want to be paid.
Right.
Then you know you've been hacked because they've done it. If you have your backups, if you have cloud storage and you're able to pull everything off immediately, you don't have to worry about it. But that will be a very clear sign that you've got a problem. You will also get weird calls from clients saying, hey, I've had a hiccup in my account. Someone's saying I haven't paid a bill, I've gotten an issue from a credit bureau, etc. Those are signs that you need to look into this to make sure that data hasn't been compromised, that you were holding for that patient, that client, that customer. So if you get these customer calls, take them seriously. Failure to take them seriously is not exercising the reasonable care you need to exercise under the law and under most of the statutes that require you to keep data private.
Anything else that businesses need to consider in your view?
Small charges on credit cards. If you see $1 or $2 charges show up randomly,
For sure. We all have.
these verification charges, call and find out what's going on with that. Threats of jail time out of nowhere, threats of seizing your license, seizing your bank accounts, those things are absolutely warning signs. The IRS will not seize your accounts just because you haven't given them money over a phone call.
Right.
They're going to send you a letter. There'll be time to talk and discuss the issue.
Right.
If you don't get a letter and someone's demanding something from you in order to avoid losing your property or your freedom, it's a scam, without a doubt.
Wow. So if we were to give businesses your top points to take away from today's discussions, what would you want them to be thinking about?
Train your people.
Train your people, train your people.
Train your people. Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would say encryption, encryption, encryption. If someone steals encrypted data, they can't get into it, no harm done. But then that means you have to have backups so you can replace the data. So encryption and backup are absolutely critical. Cyber liability insurance is absolutely critical. Those things will take you very far in getting towards the compliance that you need to have under the laws.
Okay. And I know that you help businesses across the state with these kinds of issues. So we've covered so much today, and there's so much more that we could cover. That was so informative. I wish we had more time. So if folks want to contact you for more information or for help, we're going to flash your email addresses up on the screen. There we have it for Chris, and there we have it for Joe. And the law firm's website for more information on all their services is www.whistlerpearlstein.com. I can't thank you both enough. I've learned so much. I'm afraid to answer my phone now or check my emails on a regular basis. So next time, we're going to have another attorney with us who's going to be talking about the weighty subject of real estate tax assessments. He's one of the leading attorneys in the state who covers this and who helps homeowners actually save money when their homes are reassessed. And he's going to tell us about the process and figure out if you're paying too much in real estate taxes. So until then, we hope you have a great day, and thanks for watching.